95%.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about that for a second. If you take your life's work, package it into a manuscript and submit it to a top-tier journal like Nature or the New England Journal of Medicine today, there is a 95% chance it just ends up in the recycling bin.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Right. You refresh your inbox, you see the publisher's sender name, and the very first line is always, "We regret to inform you."
Ugh, the worst. It's a uniquely stomach-dropping experience, and I mean, it's one that is almost universally dreaded across every single scientific discipline. But the crazy thing is, it is the default state of academia.
It really is. And it's not just the heavyweights either. Even if you aim for a typical specialist journal, the rejection rates routinely hover between like 60 and 80%.
Oh, easily.
So you spend months or maybe years agonizing over a data set. You finally submit it, and you get a wall of text telling you it's a no. It feels like a literal verdict on your intelligence. But in this deep dive, we are opening up the editorial black box of academic publishing to entirely change how you look at that email.
Absolutely.
We've pulled a really detailed transcript featuring a veteran journal editor and an academic consultant. And our mission today is to take that painful, universally shared experience of manuscript rejection and turn it into a strategic, actionable roadmap for your success.
And honestly, the golden truth from our source material, which I think should actually bring a lot of relief to anyone listening, is that most papers are not rejected because the research itself is fundamentally flawed.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I mean, they are rejected because the paper failed to make its case to the right journal in the right way. It's an issue of positioning, not just the science itself.
Wow, okay. Which fundamentally changes the game. I mean, if rejection isn't always a judgment on the science, we have to figure out what it is a judgment on. And our source points out that the most important diagnostic tool you have is actually the timeline.
Right, exactly.
Because when you get rejected, it tells you exactly why you were rejected.
Yeah, you really have to view the publishing process not as a single monolith, but as two completely separate gates. So the first gate is the desk rejection. This is an initial screening filter performed by the journal editor, or maybe the editor-in-chief, entirely alone. And it happens incredibly fast, usually between like 2 and 14 days after submission.
That is fast.
With a median time of just 3 days. So if your paper is rejected here, it never even saw external reviewers.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if you compare that to the second gate, the peer review rejection, that takes weeks or even several months, right? With a median time of 42 days.
Yep, 42 days is the median.
And at that stage, your paper is actually being scrutinized by 2 to 4 external volunteer reviewers. So is a desk rejection basically like the bouncer at an exclusive club checking the dress code, while peer review is the food critic actually sitting down and tasting the meal?
That is the perfect way to look at it. And that distinction is where so many early career researchers completely stumble. I mean, they get a desk rejection in 3 days, they panic, and they immediately start agonizing over their methodology.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they assume their science is broken and they need to rerun all their experiments. But the editor didn't read the methodology deeply enough to critique it.
Right. So going back to the kitchen and changing the recipe because the bouncer didn't like your shoes is a massive waste of time.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, if you get a fast rejection, you really shouldn't waste time obsessing over your methodology. The problem is you're targeting, or maybe you're signaling.
Okay, but let's look closer at that bouncer, because this initial gatekeeper is ruthless. I mean, between 30 and 70% of all submitted manuscripts die right there at the desk.
It's a huge bottleneck.
And 67% of early career researchers get zero feedback when it happens. Just a generic no. So what is actually triggering these immediate 3-day desk rejections?
Well, the source breaks it down into 3 main culprits. The first is scope mismatch. In a content analysis of nearly 900 rejected manuscripts, over 17% of desk rejections happened simply because the topic was out of the journal's scope.
Wow, 17%.
Yeah, authors often choose a journal based on its prestige or, its impact factor rather than its actual topical alignment.
And our source has a highly specific, honestly almost absurd example of this, the journal Carbon.
Oh, right, the carbon example.
Yeah, they are constantly flooded with papers that merely contain carbon materials, but the actual science isn't about the element itself. Like someone builds a battery that happens to have carbon in it, and they just submit it to Carbon.
It's wild.
The editors are literally left tearing their hair out because researchers are treating the journal title like a search engine keyword rather than an editorial philosophy.
Exactly, and it highlights a really vital nuance. It is not enough for your paper to just sound like a fit based on a buzzword. You have to actively verify the journal's specific mandate.
Okay, so scope mismatch is the first hurdle.
Yeah.
But the second culprit is where I really want to push back. Here's where it gets really interesting. According to a study of a psychiatric journal in our source, a whopping 51.8% of desk rejections cited a lack of novelty.
Yeah, novelty signaling failure. It is without a doubt the single biggest killer of manuscripts.
See, I have a real problem with this. Shouldn't brilliant science just speak for itself? Like, if a paper is genuinely rigorous and uncovers something new, shouldn't an editor be able to read it, recognize the value, and see the novelty?
You'd hope so, yeah.
Why is the burden entirely on the researcher to market their findings? It feels like we're forcing scientists to act like, I don't know, ad executives.
Look, I totally understand the frustration, but you have to consider the sheer volume and the reality of an editor's daily life. I mean, these are incredibly busy individuals handling dozens, sometimes hundreds of submissions a week.
Right.
Our source notes that an editor only spends about 2 to 5 minutes on their initial triage of a paper.
2 to 5 minutes to evaluate years of work. That's just wild.
It's brutal, but it's the structural reality. In those 2 minutes, they read the cover letter, the title, the abstract, maybe they glance at your figures, and they check the references, and that's it. If your abstract leads with a dense, generic block of methodology, and you bury your groundbreaking finding halfway down page 3 of the introduction, the editor's not going to go digging for it.
But aren't we risking losing vital science just because someone wrote a boring abstract?
Oh, we absolutely are. I mean, when an editor cites a lack of novelty in a desk rejection, they often aren't saying the research itself lacks novelty. They are saying the manuscript failed to signal that novelty explicitly in the tiny window of time they provided.
Signaling.
Right. The solution isn't to hope editors somehow magically get more time to read deeply. The solution is to adapt your writing to the reality of the triage.
Okay, so the abstract basically has to be a billboard, not a mystery novel. You can't save the twist for the end.
Exactly. Billboard abstract.
All right, so if novelty signaling is the hardest intellectual hurdle at the desk stage, what is the most preventable, unforced error?
Well, that brings us to the third culprit, which is technical non-compliance. So we are talking about formatting error. Oh, yeah. Exceeding word count limits, having bad figure resolution, mismatching citation styles, or missing required sections like ethical approvals and conflict of interest statements.
It is so hard to believe someone would do groundbreaking science and get rejected because, their margins are wrong or they used the wrong font size.
It happens constantly. In fact, many major journals literally hire assistant editors whose sole job is to screen for author guideline compliance.
You're kidding.
No, I mean, if you fail that screening, the paper is desk rejected before it ever reaches the actual editor-in-chief.
I suppose, if an author can't be bothered to read the formatting rules, it kind of signals a general carelessness. An editor might reason... Now, the manuscript actually gets scrutinized. We enter the realm of the peer reviewers, and the timeline shifts from 3 days to 42 days. So when the food critics, the experts attack, what are they actually looking for?
Well, once you reach peer review, the primary driver for rejection shifts completely. Going back to that psychiatric research study, over 50.7% of post-peer review rejections stem from methodology gaps and causal overclaim.
Causal overclaim. Okay, so this is basically claiming that a puddle caused a rainstorm just because they happen to appear at the exact same time.
Right. Reviewers are explicitly trained to hunt down observational or cross-sectional studies that use inappropriate causal language. You just cannot conclude that X causes Y if your study design can only establish that X and Y are correlated.
Makes sense.
You have to relentlessly calibrate your language to what your specific statistical design actually supports.
And this obsession with causal language and methodology plays out in really specific ways depending on your field, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our source dives into how the flavor of rejection changes across disciplines.
It really does.
Like in clinical medicine, for instance, reviewers are constantly hunting for observational studies that are masquerading as randomized controlled trials. They will tear a paper apart if it claims a definitive treatment effect without an RCT structure.
Oh, for sure. And if you contrast that clinical mindset with engineering, the definition of validity changes entirely.
How so?
Well, engineering reviewers don't necessarily care about RCTs. They care about scale. Their biggest pet peeve is when authors take a pristine, tightly controlled lab-scale result and try to generalize it to real-world, large-scale applications without proper validation against state-of-the-art baselines.
Right, it's like building a really nice Lego bridge in your living room and claiming your design is ready to span the Golden Gate.
That's exactly it.
The reviewers want to know what happens when the wind blows and the traffic hits. And then you look at basic biomedical science, where the reviewers demand mechanistic depth.
Hmm?
If you show something works in vitro in a petri dish, but you don't have the in vivo animal data or the biological mechanism to back it up, you just get rejected.
Yep. Or in chemistry and physics, where reviewers will reject a paper because the characterization data doesn't fully support the claimed chemical structures. Or, because the authors only compared their experimental work to their own theoretical models, rather than testing it against alternative working models.
Wow.
Every single discipline has its own specific threshold for what constitutes proof.
Which means knowing your audience is literally just as important as knowing your data.
But speaking of data, what about the statistics themselves? I know a lot of researchers try to insulate themselves from methodological critiques by just, adding a statistician to the author list.
Right. Well, what's fascinating here is our source reveals a highly surprising fact about that. Simply having a statistician listed as a co-author does not measurably protect a paper from statistical errors if the actual reporting in the manuscript is weak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, authorship status is not some magical talisman that wards off reviewers.
So if the text doesn't explain the p-values or the power analysis properly, the reviewers will flag it regardless of whose name is sitting at the top of the paper. Exactly. Reviewers evaluate the text on the page, not the pedigree of the authors. Common issues like underpowered studies or using the wrong tests for non-normally distributed data, they will sink a paper no matter who is on the team.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I mean, we've analyzed the 2 gates, we know how the 3-day desk rejection works, and we know what the FUMMY 2-day peer review critics are hunting for. Let's pivot to a highly actionable game plan for your own work.
Let's do it.
How do you proactively avoid these traps?
Well, step 1 has to happen long before you hit submit. Actually, even before you finish writing, you need to proactively target your journal. Most researchers write the entire manuscript and then ask, okay, where should I send this?
Which is the equivalent of buying a giant sectional couch, hauling it all the way home and just crossing your fingers that it fits to your front door. You have to measure the living room first.
I love that, yes. Measuring the living room means reading the journal's aims and scope page word for word. It means reading at least 5 to 10 recently published articles in that specific journal to really understand their editorial tone and what they currently consider novel.
Okay, and once you've targeted the journal, let's unpack the mechanics of fixing that novelty signaling issue we talked about earlier. We established the abstract as a billboard. What else does the manuscript need to do to survive the 2-minute editor triage?
You absolutely must write an explicit gap statement at the end of your introduction.
A gap statement.
Yes, do not make the editor or the reviewers guess why your work matters. A strong gap statement explicitly defines what is currently missing in the scientific literature and then precisely explains how your specific study fills that exact void.
Okay, so instead of just trailing off with something like, we studied this protein, you say, while previous literature has established X, the mechanism behind Y remains unknown. Therefore, this study aims to isolate Y using this specific novel method. You are literally drawing a map for the editor.
Exactly. You are handing them the justification they need to send it to peer review.
But let's say you do all of that. You measure the couch, you put up the billboard abstract, you write a flawless gap statement.
Yeah.
But you still get the dreaded, "We regret to inform you" email. How should a researcher use our new timeline diagnostic tool to handle the rejection?
First, you have to separate your emotions from the data. Treat the rejection timeline as objective feedback. If it is a desk rejection, meaning it came back in under a week, immediately it is a fit, framing, or formatting issue.
Right.
You do not rewrite the science. You retarget immediately to a different journal. Or if the editor specifically pointed out a formatting error, you just fix the margins or the word count and submit it to a sister journal. It is a quick pivot.
But what if it's the 42-day rejection? Because the peer review rejection brings a massive wall of critical text, and that is incredibly overwhelming.
It is. When you face a peer review rejection, the most effective strategy is to divide the reviewer comments into 3 distinct buckets.
Okay, what are the buckets?
Bucket 1, factual errors, typos, or minor clarifications that you can correct quickly. Bucket 2, requests for additions, like new experiments or deeper statistical analyses. And bucket 3, fundamental objections to your core design or conclusions.
Wow, breaking it down like that actually makes it super manageable.
It does. And the psychological trick here is to tackle the quick, minor corrections in bucket one first. It builds momentum.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. Once you are back into the rhythm of editing the manuscript, you can start evaluating whether the new experiments requested in bucket two are actually feasible or, if you need to adjust your claims in bucket three.
Now, I know the temptation for a lot of frustrated researchers is to just say, these reviewers didn't understand my brilliance, and then blindly take the exact same PDF and submit it to a new journal the next day.
Oh, please don't do that. Our source explicitly warns against blind resubmission.
Why?
Academic subfields are surprisingly small. There is a very high probability that the editor at the new journal will send your paper to the exact same external reviewers. Oh, that would be a nightmare.
Completely. If those reviewers receive your paper again and see that you ignored all their previous feedback, they will instantly reject it, and you will lose all professional credibility with them. Always incorporate the constructive feedback, even if you are changing journals.
Got it. But what about fighting back? Like, what if you read the rejection, you look at the reviewer comments, and you realize the editor just made a terrible call? Should you write a fiery email and appeal the decision?
The firm advice from our expert source is to think twice before appealing. Almost all appeals are unsuccessful, and they just drain your time.
Really? Almost all.
Yeah, the only scenario where you should even consider an appeal is if you can point to an explicit, objective, factual error made by the editor or reviewer.
Okay, so like what?
Not a difference of opinion on whether the work is novel, but a clear, factual mistake, like them claiming you didn't include a control group when the control group is literally detailed on page 4. Otherwise, you are wasting your time.
So you basically swallow your pride and move on. Yeah. Instead of arguing, take advantage of article transfer services. Many major publishers offer a system where if you are rejected from one of their top-tier journals, they will automatically help transfer your manuscript, along with the existing reviewer comments, to a more specialized sister journal in their network.
Oh, that's convenient.
It really is. It saves you the hassle of reformatting everything from scratch and significantly speeds up the publication process.
We have covered massive ground today. We decoded the timeline, explored the 3 culprits of desk rejection, dissected the methodology traps of peer review, and built a triage plan.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But to wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring in some final statistics from the source material. Because if you were listening to this and feeling just battered by the publishing world, you need to internalize this. The median number of submissions before an article is finally accepted is 1 to 3.
Which means getting rejected once or twice is the mathematical norm. It is not an anomaly.
Exactly. Even the most highly cited, groundbreaking, world-changing papers, many of them were desk rejected at least once before finding their home. Rejection is quite literally the foundation of the scientific publishing process.
This raises an important question, though, something for you to mull over as you return to your own research.
Okay.
If rejection is this systemic, and if getting published relies so heavily on novelty signaling, 2-minute elevator pitches and abstracts and, formatting perfection, is the academic publishing system inadvertently filtering out brilliant scientific ideas simply because the researchers lack training in marketing?
Wow. It really brings us back to that tension we discussed earlier. Are we turning scientific publishing into a test of salesmanship rather than a pure evaluation of scientific merit?
Exactly. I mean, if 51% of desk rejections are for lack of novelty, but it's really just a lack of signaling novelty, how much vital science is currently sitting in a drawer just because the author didn't know how to write a billboard abstract? The system isn't perfect, but until it changes, mastering these communication skills is just as critical as mastering your lab equipment.
That is a phenomenal thought to leave on. I mean, what breakthroughs are we missing out on just because of a buried lead? But for you, the listener, you now have the playbook. You know how to measure the room before you buy the couch. You know how to decode the bouncer's 3-day timeline. And you know how to logically bucket the food critic's feedback. Use this new perspective to bypass the gatekeepers and get your brilliant ideas out into the world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. And remember, the next time you open your inbox and see a message from an editor, don't let your stomach drop. It's just data. Use it.